Welcome back to Kings of Columbus Sunday Sound Off. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We are going to talk about Ohio State's loss to Oregon on Saturday night. We did it on KOTN right after it happened on Saturday night, but that's for a national northern audience and was instantaneous. This is for only an Ohio State audience. And I stayed up till 5 o'clock in the morning rewatching every play and cataloging them and going through the Dan Lanning and Ryan Day post-game news conferences and looking stuff up. So this show is different. And so, Landis, I do think we have some understandably upset, frustrated, angry Ohio State fans in our tech subscriber service. Did it get to 700?
It did get to 700. Yeah, okay. I can pull you the official count. I don't have on hand, but it was around 700. Yeah.
So that's to our tech subscribers. We send a call out right after the game. Share your thoughts. Ask questions. More than 700. Most of
733.
733. Most of them using the two F words that we hear after an Ohio State game like this, directed at a variety of people, including us a little bit here and there. But so that's what we're going to go through. We're going to respond to what Ohio State fans are thinking. But Landis, I again sort of have like I don't want to say I have a handle on it. Doesn't mean I understand it, but I did go through everything. So how do you want to start?
Well, I didn't go through everything. I rewatched highlights mostly on Sunday morning. So I am not as thorough in my rewatching as of this recording as you are. So I guess before we get to a lot of the comments and thoughts and questions that came in, I want to ask you, has your view on this changed since you've rewatched and cataloged everything that happened on Saturday night?
Maybe 15% has changed. So I still think after the game, we sort of agreed Oregon played like a 9.5 out of 10, and maybe Ohio State played like a 7.5. I don't think Ohio State blew it. I don't think Ohio State played a terrible game. I thought it was obviously competitive down to the final snap. I did go through and I cataloged every play as good Ohio State play, bad Ohio State play, good Oregon play, bad Oregon play, or just SH. Stuff happens. It's just football. You throw a swing pass that gains 4.5 yards and the guy makes a tackle, like that's just football. I have Oregon with 14 good plays and Ohio State with 20 good plays. And that can be a variety of things. It can be a 32-yard pass. It can be an open field tackle. It can be correctly blocking something up and springing somebody for a 12-yard run. So Ohio State, more good plays, 20-14. Bad plays, I had Oregon with 3 bad plays the entire game. And the 3 bad Oregon plays, one was the third down where they lined up in like the weird formation and then just like did nothing, and that was odd. One was a high snap to Dylan Gabriel that he dropped and then like had to throw a quick little pass and they caught it, but it was an actual loss of 2 yards in the pass. And the other one was the 4th and 1 that they went for and Tez Johnson was wide open and they didn't throw it to him. Those were the only 3 truly, I thought, like bad plays that Oregon had in the game. I have Ohio State with 13 bad plays. So 13-3 is a lot. To your point of like, I was like, I thought that was a well-played high-level game, and you thought that less so. I think in the end, there were 3 areas where Ohio State made mistakes that really turned the game. Do you want to hear those 3 areas?
Yeah, and maybe we can work in some comments relative to those 3 areas if we have them.
Okay. Let's start with maybe the least obvious one. I actually thought the right guard position was a major problem the entire game.
Yeah.
And I had 3 Austin Sareveld involved, bad plays. And there was another section at the end. I didn't notice it in real time, but Tegra Shabola late in the game, after he came back in, after he was injured, got a false start penalty on a flinch. On the next play, got beaten pretty convincingly by the defensive tackle, who at least the defensive tackle split McLaughlin and Shabola and got pressure on Will Howard that blew up a play. And then Tegra Shabola came out and did not come back in the game. So for the next snap, Austin Sareveld was in. So whatever it was, whether he was dealing with the injury or something happened, those back-to-back plays were bad enough that they took him out of the game. But Sareveld also had multiple times, and this is what we talked about before the game, where they just got blown up by the defensive tackles for Oregon in a super impactful way. And some of those plays I gave to good Oregon plays, but some of them I gave to bad Ohio State plays of like, wow, you got beaten in a nanosecond and it destroyed the play. So the vibes that anybody's been feeling about, yeah, right tackle is a weak link on the offensive line. I think I thought it showed up in a major way. And if you want to go, I think you could find potentially 7 plays happening in, around, over, or near right guard that had a very negative effect on Ohio State, whether it was because of great Oregon defensive tackles or just a subpar play by the Buckeyes.
Yeah, the one that jumps to mind immediately for me is the 1 third down run where it looked like Travion Henderson bounced it and then got tackled by Mateo Uiagalelei. And yes, Trey probably could have planted his foot and gone inside and perhaps still gotten the first down. But the reason he had to bounce it is because the right guard, which I believe was Ceraville in that play, lost immediately. Tegra Shabola, Pro Football Focus, of the 20 offensive players that were graded, Tegra Shabola was 18th. Austin Ceraville was slightly better at 16th. Tegra got hurt, and I assume when he came back into the game was playing hurt. And when they took him out of the game, it was because he was playing ineffective while trying to play hurt. So
yes,
I guess that's part of it. But yeah, this was and I don't think Donovan Jackson played particularly well either. There were concerns about the interior offensive line coming into this game because it just hadn't really been. I don't want to say it hadn't been testing because Iowa has good defensive tackles, but this was a different task, I think, with the athleticism that Oregon has at defensive tackle, and clearly the test wasn't met. Right, the question wasn't answered by Ohio State, or at least wasn't answered in the affirmative. So yeah, I think that is a spot on offense, maybe the only spot on offense that really jumped out to me is a little problematic. We didn't get, at least again, there were 733 responses, so I didn't get the one that referenced specifically right guard. There is some Josh Simmons stuff, which do you want to talk about that here, or do you want to save it for later? While we're talking,
you tell me. You tell me. We can talk offensive line.
Yeah. Let's just so Tim said Josh Simmons being out is like a hole in the Death Star, which I thought was an interesting way to couch the injury to Ohio State's left tackle, which sounds like it will be a season-ending one. Ryan Day has not officially said that, but he did say after the game that it does not look good for Josh Simmons to return this season. It was a non-contact knee injury. Those usually aren't great. And then Donovan asked whether or not Zen Michalski was going to be the full-time replacement for Josh Simmons. So I guess we can kind of loop those two together. I guess I would say, like, first blush, watching the game last night, I thought to myself, well, the left tackle spot didn't seem like much of an issue after Josh Simmons went out. And then what I did rewatch, I would like to change my stance on that, because I actually think the left tackle position was not particularly good. And Will Howard, I think, actually did a nice job of hanging in and making plays with pressure coming off of that side that helped mask some of the issues there. So I don't know. I don't think that was nearly a good enough performance from Zen Michalski in a tough spot against a good defensive line on the road to say that he definitely has that spot locked down. So Ohio State has 2 weeks to figure out what that's going to look like. I think everything should be on the table, including perhaps moving Tegra Shabola to tackle, but that maybe is not the best conversation to have now if we're talking about how suspect that right guard position looked with him last night.
Up until Simmons got hurt, Ohio State, he got hurt on their 5th drive, and they scored a touchdown on that drive. They finished it off. So those 5 drives were 3 touchdowns, the fumble, and a punt. So they scored 21 that Josh Simmons was a part of, and they scored 10 that Josh Simmons wasn't a part of. Now, they didn't have many possessions in the second half. So they had a punt drive after Simmons went out. They had a touchdown drive to open the second half. Really good without Josh Simmons. Then they punted. Then they drove for a field goal. They had 4, and then they had the game-ending drive. They had 4 possessions in the second half.
Yeah.
Which is like crazy. But yeah, so now that's 2 spots that are of concern. One that we knew, we could have told you in May that right guard might be that spot. So that's not a surprise. But then to lose that, and I mean, there's no arguing that offensive line health is, I think, is often one of the 3 things that are a key part of a great team. That if you find a team who had a great year, I think a lot of times you'll say we stayed really healthy on the offensive line, and you'll find that in Ohio State's great years. And so that's now not going to be true for this team. And so now that's something to overcome. Doesn't mean they can't overcome it, but I don't think there's a way on a Sunday morning that we can mitigate that and act like it's not a huge deal.
No, I think it is a huge deal. I think I said on Saturday night on KTN for anybody watching that I wasn't ready to like rethink what I think Ohio State is capable of just because like this is now the reality. I'd like to see it first, but I guess I'm a little more concerned about it now, even though I haven't seen what that's going to look like moving forward, just because of some of the things I went back and did see upon rewatch against Oregon. So yeah, I think it drastically alters maybe what Ohio State will be able to do on offense the rest of the way without Josh Simmons.
Yeah. All right. The second thing is Will Howard. I had Will Howard with 3 bad plays, and there's like an under the radar one that wasn't at front of mind for me on the show Saturday night. So one is the last play of the game. Obviously, you've got to have a clock in your head. One is the first play of the last drive, which they overcame, but that he got pressured, and then as he was sort of backpedaling to maybe spin out of pressure, fell down. And that was the 1 sack of the game, was a devastating start to that drive. And then to Ohio State's credit, they overcame that. And then they hit 3 straight throws to get a first down, and it actually kind of didn't matter. But in the moment, it was a terrible situation for Ohio State. And then the third one that I think is just a huge play is dropping the snap on 3rd and 3. It's like a turnover. You have to expect at that point they're going to convert a 3rd and 3, or if they don't, maybe go for it. But instead, he drops the snap, and now it's 4th and longer. And now they have to punt, and it hit him in the hands. And it was a devastating situation at that point in the game.
Yeah, that was at that moment as they were moving the ball on that drive. A decent part of me felt like, okay, this is where Ohio State wins the game. Because it got
1 minute left in the third quarter. 1 minute left in the third quarter.
It scored. It got a stop. It got the ball back, and it was looking to go up 2 scores. And then it didn't happen just because the quarterback dropped the ball. We got a decent amount of Will Howard stuff. I'll just run through a couple of these. Anthony says, yes, it was a big mistake, meaning the slide at the end, but I genuinely feel bad for Will Howard. I know he's kicking himself for not making a better decision and sliding earlier on that last play. In my opinion, he had a really good game, and I don't think it's fair to let that one play define his entire performance. PK said, Will Howard was very good, but sometimes he just has brain farts. That drop snap on 3rd and 3 after the 4th and goal stop was huge. The sack on the last drive where he just fell down and lost 10 yards and lost a lot of time. And then obviously the last play of the game. And then Brandon, I think, and I think perhaps fairly so, a little more critical of it. He says, maybe I'm in the minority, but man, Will Howard just seemed to crumble in all the big moments.
I'm not shocked, but I'm not giving up on Will Howard. I think there's a lot to learn from that game. And you would understand. Here's the thing, too. Sometimes when you're young, you don't know what you don't know. But when you're old, you do know everything. And there's no doubt that Will Howard knew exactly how big that game was, knew exactly what the environment was going to be like, but it still was new to him. That was not a Big 12 game, right? That's not a shot at the Big 12. That was one of the 2 biggest games in college football this year. And he was at the steering wheel for it. And he's been through a lot, but he hasn't been through that. So I didn't think he didn't make brain fart throws, which I think you would have been worried about. Oh, wow, he didn't see that linebacker and there's a pick 6. That happens in games like this. Certainly did not happen. Wasn't running like with the ball loose in his hand. Why didn't he tuck that away? That wasn't even that good of a tackle and he dropped it. Didn't have those, but the 3 that we just covered were huge. And I don't know if we want to talk about, do we want to use this to talk about the last play and the last drive?
Yeah, we can. Do you want to get into some clock management stuff too?
Yeah.
So
I think this is a reasonable conversation.
Yeah, I guess before we get to that, I will say that the sack, slipping the way he did on the sack looked like a quarterback who was terrified of the moment. But then he came back and made some big throws. Like the throw to Emeka Ibuka down the sideline was an awesome throw. And he had a couple of
100%.
he had a couple of others too. And then it just like ends on a very odd situation where he's like trying to make a play, and yes, he should have gotten down sooner, or maybe not scrambled at all, just thrown the ball away and lived the play another down and give yourself one more shot to get to the end zone. But I thought, like I think I said Saturday night, like 99% of Will Howard's game was very good. I thought, and also came out of the shoot like hot, like was not rattled at the start of that game. I just like played very well, and I think both quarterbacks played well, but there were definitely times where I thought Will was outplaying Dylan Gabriel a little bit, and then Will had the shot at the end and he couldn't do it. So, all right,
it's one of those things. You're always everything in life. You can't pick and choose in moments. But they were talking a lot during the game that Will Howard is bigger and more physical than Dylan Gabriel, and on fourth down sneaks and times when the red zone, when you want to run the quarterback, that really matters. I don't think Dylan Gabriel would fall down escaping the pocket. I think Dylan Gabriel's a little more nimble than Will Howard. But we had a lot of conversations this season. Bo Nix is like Will Howard, and I would take Bo Nix. But there are things, right? Dylan Gabriel is he's a tap dancer back there a little bit. Like just watching, because I don't know what I believe. We always just say this with the PFF numbers. Take them with a grain of salt. They're good for comparison. JT Tuimoloau had 7 pressures in that game, but I didn't feel like Dylan Gabriel acted like he was pressured. So I suppose if you get in the backfield, but the tackle pushes you wide and this super veteran quarterback calmly steps up in the pocket and makes a 30-yard throw, I can understand why that might get checked as a pressure, but it had no effect on the play. So that guy was just very much in control. The third down pull for the touchdown run was huge by him. And so I thought Dylan Gabriel was composed, did not throw the killer pick like he had thrown in the previous 2 games for Oregon. I thought he was composed basically 100% of the time. And I thought Will Howard was composed 93.5% of the time. And if that game was played in Ohio Stadium instead of Autzen Stadium, maybe that would have been flipped.
I think that's right. Dylan Gabriel, according to PFF, was pressured, and we're going to talk about the defense, was pressured almost 40% of the time. I did not feel that well.
I did not feel that way either.
And I guess, I mean, those numbers could be slightly off, but I think to your point, it's a credit to Dylan Gabriel for handling that pressure when it was there and not making it feel like that was actually the case. All right, let's talk about the last drive. There were a lot of,
there's a lot
as you
to
can
this.
imagine. Yeah,
there's a lot to this.
So we'll use. So Terry said, "How was our clock management so bad in the last minute?" Which I think he's speaking for almost everybody who sent in a text when he asked that question.
Yes. Okay. There are probably 3 things that happened on that drive that really are the key things here.
Yep.
So to your point, when they take over with 1:47 left at their 25-yard line, they have, against a 4-man rush, protecting with 5, Howard gets a little jittery and falls down. And it's like, oh no. Then they go 8-yard pass, 8-yard pass, 9-yard pass on the next 3 plays. And then they go the awesome 26-yard pass to Emeka Egbuka. So after Will Howard falls down, he responds by going 4 for 4 on the next 4 plays for 51 yards. They move 51 yards in 4 plays and get into field goal range immediately with 34 seconds left. Then he throws a ball to the front corner of the end zone to Jeremiah Smith. That is probably the only thing on that drive that's a little, not the only thing, the only pass that's a little hinky. It wasn't a great throw. I don't think it was a great route. He wasn't open, but with a better ball, maybe you give him a chance to go up and make a play. I understand it wasn't a bad play. I understood why they threw it. And that's if the pass is 8 inches lower, you're creating an opportunity for a one-handed Jeremiah Smith catch at the 1-yard line.
Yep.
That was with 34 seconds left. The next play, 2nd and 10 from the 28, is the Jeremiah Smith play. So do we want to talk about this first? Because having just seen people who would know these things on Twitter, it feels like there's a case for that was an offensive pass interference, because Chimdi Chekwa said this on Twitter, who is a great former Ohio State player. He said that's just a release. When the DB is getting grabby with you and you are like trying to create an opportunity for yourself, that's just part of football. And so the commentators in the moment did not have a problem with the call. In the moment, I did not have a problem with the call. I don't think it is egregious, but I think there's a case for that was not pass interference.
I didn't have a problem with it in the moment either. Watching it back now several times, I do think it could have gone either way, and it did sort of feel like ultimately Jeremiah Smith got penalized for being stronger than the defensive back because they were both pushing each other, and Jeremiah is bigger.
I thought he, in the name of just like battling, I thought he went 25% past battling. He did. I thought there's like a little bit of an arm extension.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the exact thing that caused the ref to throw the flag.
Yeah.
I also think there's an opportunity there for let him play. So, and that Oregon is complaining about it. That should have been push off, but they're not definitive either. So I think it's probably a 50-50 play. It might even be like a 65-35 play towards Ohio State, that that should only be called 35% of the time. That was from the 28-yard line. It would have been first down at the 19-yard line with 22 seconds left if that play had stood. So now you are probably getting into kneel it out territory and asking Jaden Fielding where he wants the ball. You might run one more play. If that stands, it's now 3rd and 1 from the 19. I think you run a play that if you get a first down, great, but fine. I think you are running your last play to set up a 37-yard field goal if they don't call that.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Like I don't have really any problem whatsoever with playing for the field goal in that scenario, right? Like I think that's
yes, because
don't play for a 50-yard field goal, but if you're playing for a field goal to win the game, I think that's fine.
Aggressive defense.
Yeah.
The read you don't see coming, a left tackle that just came in the game. Oh my God. Like, so I think that's what they would have done. So that's part one of that drive. And I don't know. So I don't know what Ohio State fans want to do with that. If you want to be angry at the refs, if you want to be frustrated by that, if you want to think it was taken from you, I think there's certainly enough room to have those feelings. But also, okay, so now what? But it's devastating, Bill. Instead of it being at the 19-yard line with the catch, it's at the 43-yard line. So it's a 15-yard penalty.
Yeah.
But it's a 24-yard penalty because it wipes out the gain and you go backwards 15 yards. So the difference between being at the 19 and the 43 with 16 seconds left, 22 seconds left, whatever it would have been, is a gulf. It's gigantic.
It is gigantic. When do we get to the part of the conversation about all the time that Ohio State cost itself?
Okay, so that's next. So now it's 2nd and 25 from the 43, and the penalty was called with 22 seconds left. I just want to make it clear, like, what is? They lost 6 seconds. They didn't lose 14 seconds through this stuff. They snapped it with 16 seconds left. If the clock had not started, and by all accounts, it should have, right? That's not a mismanagement by the officials.
No,
because it's an offensive penalty so it's a live ball. So if they had realized it, if they had known exactly what was going on, let's say it still takes them a second to snap it. I think they lost 5 seconds there.
That's a play, though.
It is a play in a game where your quarterback's sliding with half a second left. Yeah. It's huge. So I think this is the number one thing that people can and should be mad at Ryan Day about.
I think it stretches. So I was trying to do some, back of the napkin math watching that last drive. Will Howard got sacked on that first play.
Yeah.
It was 15 seconds until they snapped the ball for the next play. They had completed a pass to Carnell Tate in bounds. It was 15 seconds after that play before they snapped the ball. Jeremiah Smith caught a ball over the middle where he went down before the first down marker. I think maybe he thought he was there and he wasn't. So it was 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1. Another 15 seconds after that before Ohio State snapped the ball. Then it lost 6 after the Jeremiah Smith penalty, and then it lost 4 on the 12 men on the field penalty that I guess Oregon might have done intentionally.
Because we need to do that. That's a 5-minute conversation. We'll get to that.
But that's what, 45, 50. Yep. It's like almost a minute of time went off the clock because I think Ohio State. I know it's always tricky when you're in the 2-minute, to operate quickly but not operate hurriedly, and I think they got a little caught in between there and cost themselves, I think, a pretty significant chunk of time that obviously would have been valuable, and also took a timeout, and they kept the timeout in their pocket when the game ended, which isn't great.
So if the penalty's not called, there's 5 of 6 passing on the drive and moving into field goal range pretty smoothly. So there is the balance of you want to be fast but not hurry. So they were efficient with what they were doing. I think they were getting the calls they wanted, they were getting the plays they wanted, they were getting the routes and the passes they wanted. But if you go with more alacrity, they win.
I thought there was a little
or
bit
at least they put it on Jaden Fielding's foot. That it came down to a second. You just outlined 4 opportunities to have gained back that second, and more.
There was just like a lack of urgency, which is like they ran the plays they needed to run, and they got the ball in the position they needed to get it. So I guess, and you're not banking on getting a 15-yard killer offensive pass interference penalty where that brings the time obviously into more importance. But veteran quarterback Chip Kelly calling plays, Ryan Day on the field, you need to manage the clock far better than Ohio State did.
Yeah, I think that's indisputable, and there's no reason for it. So, I mean, the reasons for it are it's a tough environment in a visiting stadium, and the first play of the drive got out of whack, and maybe that affected them. And they're like, okay, well, if we go too fast, we're going to have that happen again. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess too, like there's 2. So in that drive, it's Austin Sareveld and Zem Wojcicki are on the field, right?
Yep.
2 guys that have never been in that position before. There were definitely a couple plays where it felt like Will Howard was ready for the snap, but the offensive line was still looking to the sideline to try to figure out what the protection call was. So I guess that probably compounds it a little bit too, if you have 2 guys on the field who need an extra second or 2 to figure out what they're doing.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think where I had it. On 2nd and 25. Yeah. The snap. There was a play that Austin Sareveld on that drive after the penalty. When they did on 2nd and 25, when they got the snap off finally with 16 seconds left, Austin Sareveld gave up a pressure that the defensive player hit Will Howard's arm on a throw, and that affected the throw, and it was incomplete. So, yeah, but that's all excuses. They should have executed that. And if they did execute it better, a little bit better, they would have given themselves an opportunity at a game-winning field goal and closer than 50 yards. So I don't think Ryan Day and Chip Kelly can't watch that, and Will Howard can't watch that back and disagree with that. So that's 1,000% fair criticism, and it needs to be better. And those are winning plays in the moment. Now, it wasn't incompetent. It wasn't a clown show. It wasn't buffoonery. They were marching down the field and completing passes, but it needed to be 30% faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing we've talked about, like with Kyle McCord nearly throwing a pick on the Notre Dame drive last year, that wasn't that. They didn't hit a defender in the chest with any passes on this drive, right? So
yeah,
the plays they did run were effective up into the pass interference. They just needed to run them faster.
Yep.
So let's talk about the 12 men on the field call. It's an out to Jeremiah Smith. Jabbar Muhammad covers it well and knocks it down. I think it is fairly definitive. This is on 3rd and 25 from the 43-yard line with 10 seconds left. I think it's pretty definitive. This has been pointed out by other people that Oregon had 12 men on the field on purpose to allow them to play tighter coverage and not give up a big play. And that they knew, so they were increasing their chances of not giving up a big play, and they were willing to take the penalty yardage to do that and run the clock. So you could look at it. I initially was like, okay, I saw people say they did it on purpose. Then I watched it. It was like, well, then, but it was stupid to do it on purpose because all it did was give Ohio State 5 extra yards on what was an incomplete pass. And then it was like, no, because having 12 men, I think potentially allowed them to cover Jeremiah Smith like that. Because Jabbar Muhammad said, I can be all over him and not be worried about a double move because I have an extra guy back here. Yeah. I think it was 100% on purpose.
I think it was too. I did not watch. Or no, I did watch Dan Lanning's press conference. He wasn't asked whether or not it was on purpose.
Not asked about that. He was asked about the onside kick, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. I think it was on purpose too. I also like that is. I should know the rule better, I suppose. I think there is an opportunity. Ryan Day clearly knew there were 12 players on the field because he was screaming at the official on this snap. And I
Yes.
believe the rule is if you take a timeout or if you just let the play clock run down and don't snap the ball, you get the time back.
Hmm.
So it seemed like in that moment that Dan Lanning and his staff had a pretty good idea of what the rule book said, and Ryan Day did not.
And somebody else suggested this on Twitter. I did not have a chance to look this up. The idea that illegal substitution, which is more according to what this person's idea was of the rule book, a 5-yard penalty for illegal substitution is like we have 12 guys, someone's trying to run off the field and they didn't get off. But just literally playing with 12 and playing the play with 12 is illegal participation, and that's 15 yards. I don't know if that's true, but somebody suggested that,
they called
and
the wrong foul. Yeah,
that it should have been an extra 10 yards for Ohio State, which would have been made a huge difference.
Yeah.
So, and we can go to this point next, but Dan Lanning in a key moment did a like Belichickian sneaky. Mike Vrabel does stuff like that, right? You know the ins and outs of the rule book so much that in a key situation, you find a loophole. And the outcome was Ohio State got 5 yards, but they lost 4 seconds. And it enhanced potentially greatly Oregon's chances of not getting beat for a big play on a must-have-it situation for Ohio State.
Yeah, it did. I don't. Sometimes in like these scenarios, you end up giving coaches a little too much credit for something maybe they weren't intending to do, but ends up working out well in the end. This very much felt intentional to me. This felt like Oregon's staff taking the time to study these kind of situations and what best practices are. And I think is another thing you just kind of throw on top of the pile of Ohio State not doing that.
Yeah. So then we get to the last play. So it's now at 6 seconds. They snap it. Ryan Day talked about this in the post-game press conference. They had 3 guys on the right, all kind of running sideline routes, and that's where they wanted to go. Will Howard has Brandon Inniss right there. It is only for like a 4-yard gain. So you couldn't see in the shot, I couldn't see the other 2 routes. Inniss was the shortest route on that side, but it was open. If he takes him right away, they have a completion and can get out. They don't even need to get out of bounds. They can get down. And he didn't take it. And I think he didn't take it because he thought it wasn't enough yards. So if he takes it immediately, if he takes the first open thing after taking the snap with 6 seconds left, and they complete the ball to Brandon Inniss at the 34-yard line, maybe he gets to the 33 or the 32, but you're in a 50-yard field goal range, which is right in Noah Ruggles' range. I mean, the Georgia kick was 50 yards.
Jaden Fielding.
So I mean, like, but that was Noah Ruggles' range, and he missed it. So now Jaden Fielding has never kicked his career long's 47. I don't know what they were talking about. I think they must have had a yard marker in line. I bet that was inside. I think they probably said we want to get to the 30. And so Will Howard drops back there and looks, and he's like, I can make a completion to the 34, but is that good enough? It's not. So now we're stuck in a position with Ohio State where they have a very accurate field goal kicker who doesn't have the biggest leg in the world, maybe. Although maybe he does, and they just haven't given him the opportunity. But guys are drilling 50-yarders across the sport. And Ohio State lost a chance at a national championship by missing a 50-yarder. And it felt like the looming idea of a 50-yarder influenced, I think, these last 10 seconds. Because I think because they could have, even when they're at the 20, like if they're snapping that. Now, this is too long, I guess. But they're snapping that at the 38. They could have just kicked a 55-yard field goal with 6 seconds left and said, we don't trust ourselves to get this play down. Kick the 55-yarder now.
Yeah.
I think like the Pitt kicker, who's really good, I think Pitt would have said, we're kicking it now. I'm not saying that's right. I'm saying I think they are still a little uncertain in their field goal kicking, even though Jaden Fielding has been very effective when called upon. What do you think of that idea?
I think he could be onto something. I said earlier, like, don't play for a 50-yard field goal, but if a penalty knocks you back to that position and there's 6 seconds left, like, it's not the worst idea in the world, I suppose. And the thing about Jaden Fielding is, like, he is actually supposed to have a big leg. That was a lot of the discussion back in the Georgia game when Noah Ruggles missed that kick. Jaden Fielding was on the roster. We had heard like all that whole year, like Jaden Fielding like has some pretty good distance, and Noah Ruggles does not or did not. So that was part of the anger of that particular situation was first and foremost playing for that field goal, but then too like not putting your like long field goal guy out there to try to kick it. And like Jaden Fielding hit that 40-yarder earlier in the fourth quarter. He crushed it. Like that thing had plenty of room to spare, right? So I think he has the leg that trying a 50-yard field goal there wouldn't have been an egregious decision given how much time was on the clock. But also,
what did you think of how Howard handled that last play with seconds left?
I didn't go back to watch like the way that the routes developed as closely as you did. So my initial reaction without looking at that was like I didn't hate the scramble. He just took it one step too far. Like if he slides one step short of where he ultimately decided to slide, there's 2 seconds left and you can call timeout and try to kick a field goal.
I think it's in his head there too. He slides at the 29. So he's sliding for a 46-yard field goal. I don't think he wanted to slide for a 49-yard field goal, right? I think I would be very I bet the 30-yard line came up. We got to get to the 30. We got to get to the 30. I just can envision that conversation because you're trying to just make sure everybody has the right context and the shorthand. And what are we trying to do here? We're trying to get to the 30. And it felt like they were hell-bent on that. And I will say there is a screen grab that is out there of Will Howard sliding, and there's 1 second on the clock. I nanosecond that thing by thing. The slide is on the back end of 1 second. Like he is also standing completely upright, and you can get a screenshot of him standing, and it's 1 second. So when he starts to slide, he's sliding in the final 0.3 of that 1 second. I think it have been impossible. Like they were not going to get that. He was down. Let's get it with 1 second left. It was too tight, and so he needed to slide 3 yards earlier.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's when he starts the slide is when the play is like technically dead, right? But I guess like that's probably not reviewable. I'd imagine it's when the official blows his whistle.
And there's like there's the idea of that and the practice of that. Is the guy starts to slide, but they still wait for you to like hit the ground and finish the slide. They always do. No official is ever like blowing it dead as you're sliding, still moving down the field, right? So he took too long. So that is not where I think I would not. I think there are reasonable frustrations with many things on this drive for Ohio State fans. I think that's not one. It's more the Jeremiah Smith push off and the Ohio State clock management in general.
Yeah. So I did kind of think Will Howard might just try to rumble for it, like once he got going. And I didn't see the all 22 to see what the second and third levels of the defense looked like. But I'm not saying he would have gotten there, but like once he got 3 yards down the field, I was like, all right, well, you're out of time. So I guess you're just trying to do this. And then he slid. I was like, oh, I guess not.
Because they had 3 receivers on that right side. They had Jeremiah Smith by himself on the left. And you can see, and obviously the play calls to the right side, to a 3-level route on the right side. Jeremiah Smith wins, what a shock, on a crosser. If Will Howard like gets back to him and rips it and Jeremiah Smith catches it and falls down, I think there's a shot there. But you can see once Will Howard starts running, Jeremiah Smith is like, let's go. And I think Jeremiah Smith was ready to block 6 people if need be on that rumble, if he was going to rumble for it. So it's right. It's a game of there's inches all around us or whatever. I'd actually never watched that movie. There's seconds all around us. They were literally 2 seconds short. And there were a lot of those seconds kind of floating around there on that drive, and they could have grabbed any of them. I thought it was not incompetent, but bad management on the last drive. I think it is reasonable finger pointing at the adult millionaires in charge of that needed to be more effective there. But I don't think that Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and Will Howard are an incompetent trio of late game managers that they can't get this better. So that's not an excuse.
I mean, I guess
I'm not. That doesn't mean that Ohio State fans have to accept it on a Sunday morning. But
the Will Howard's an interesting piece to that conversation because I don't know that I have a ton of confidence in Ryan Day getting better because this is not the first time that Ryan Day has poorly managed the end of a game. maybe Will Howard can learn from it and get better, and that'll be enough.
Yeah. Do we want to have this other portion of a Ryan Day conversation here before I get to the third part of the mistakes? Do we want to do? Let's do Ryan Day right now.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So yeah, we can. There's a lot of Ryan Day stuff. I did. A lot of it was of similar thought, right? So I'll just run through.
Oh,
I'll just run through a couple of these.
Yeah.
Tony says, Day's been given everything. He got $2 million a year to hire Jim Knowles, who had just won coordinator of the year. He got $3 million to steal the UCLA head coach to be his offensive coordinator. He's been given every resource and 6 seasons and nothing to show for it. Ross, 1-7 versus top 5 teams is not good enough as the Ohio State head coach. I'm not calling for his job, but that's not good enough. Will, I know that in the end, Ohio State still has all of their goals ahead of them and that this loss doesn't matter. But I do not see a world where Ryan Day magically gets it figured out how to beat the best teams and go on a playoff run. Dakota, this has been my issue with Ryan Day for the last 3 years. When talent is equal or close to equal, they find a way to lose. His signature win continues to be 2020 Clemson. To me, a talent-equated game is the true barometer of coaching. Consistently, we have been out-coached. And then Laura, a little more measured, I think, but I think most of the responses were more like the ones I just read. Laura says, to be clear, I'm not complaining about the program. We're very lucky and one of the best, but it feels like we always lose big games. For what it's worth, I do love Ryan Day. I think there's no one better out there. Maybe it's not true and it just seems like it. I know there's I know a loss in a new playoff world doesn't matter, but this one is tough for many reasons.
So what I have 2 points about Ryan Day when it comes to this.
I think 1-7 is 1-7, and I agree that it's not good enough. And the thing that
actually I think it's 1-7. I think it's 2-7, but
the second Notre Dame game, they weren't top 5. Is there a Penn State in there?
Yeah,
top 5. Okay, maybe it's 2-7 then. Either way, I still don't think that's good enough. My biggest frustration is that, especially with the late game stuff, this was supposed to be avoided by the shifts that Ryan Day made in the offseason. And then when the moment came, we got more of the same, despite him being in a new position to allegedly have a better idea of how to manage a game, of how to get his team lined up and ready to play in the biggest moments. Like I didn't think Ohio State showed up on ready to play. I thought by and large, especially the offense, played a pretty good game. But in crunch time, I do think the head coach let them down, especially in the areas where he was supposed to be more efficient this year because of the changes that were made.
So it's 2-7 because the 2 wins are the Clemson semifinal revenge and the one Notre Dame game.
And Notre Dame, right?
So that's actually my second point. I'll save that for later because I want to make a broader point about that. This is feeling a little Tressel-esque to me, of 06 and 07 with Tressel and when they were doing this, and like 08 in the Fiesta Bowl against Texas, when they were not winning games against equal talent teams and like not getting over the top. So I think the number one criticism for me here with Ryan Day is I can't remember Ohio State having a moment or a play in a game like this where they did something extra or special and you were like, oh man, they dialed it up there in a huge moment. And if that's my memory, I apologize. Maybe people can remember those, but what I'm talking about is the example that leaps to mind for a lot of Ohio State fans is Jim Tressel lining up Ted Ginn Jr. as a tight end against Michigan and releasing him down the field for a huge touchdown pass. We're talking about the double reverse receiver pass versus Alabama in the semifinal, right? They dialed that up. We're talking about Dan Lanning absolutely talking about it in the postgame on purpose, line driving a kickoff at an Ohio State player to steal a possession. Ryan Day doesn't do that. I think Ryan Day believes in Ohio State's talent too much. And he thinks if we are tough and physical and we execute, we can march up and down the field, play these guys head up, and we're good enough to win. And there is not that moment. And it doesn't have to be trick plays, but I think in games like this, you need a moment where it feels like the head coach stole you something. Oh my God. And they don't do that with him. They do not do that. Their version of that is, right, they ran whatever, the full house 3-man backfield at the goal line with Patrick Gurd and 2 tailbacks and got in from the 3-yard line. But they don't do it in a big way. They don't. And again, and I think it's because he believes in his team too much. And I do think it's because he's afraid of turnovers and he's afraid of mistakes, to the extent that he thinks if we play our game and don't make mistakes, we're going to win. So he doesn't want to push the extra. Penn State beat USC in part because they had 2 quarterbacks on the field and lined up their tight end as a center and ran him he snapped it, ran down the middle of the field, and they threw a ridiculous touchdown pass. Now, again, it didn't exactly work, and they got the touchdown anyway. And I'm not asking Ohio State to be Penn State, because Penn State is a talent gap. They're a cut below Ohio State on talent, so they have to strive more. I don't think Ohio State strives enough under Ryan Day in these moments. And I think it is indisputable. And they are at the point where they need that. The head coach needs to have a play or two in a game. Even Kirby Smart calling the timeout before the fake in the Georgia semifinal is a direct, oh my God, the head coach just did that in the moment. I can see it. He saved them. We don't see that.
We don't see that. And that's like, we've talked about that in Michigan games, right? Because that's when Tress always dusted something off for the Michigan game, and Ohio State really has not done that under Ryan Day, when Michigan certainly has in a couple of the games of late. So I think that's a fair criticism. And again, it only gets compounded by oh, he's not the offensive coordinator anymore. He should have more time to do these kinds of things. But even the special teams play, like Ryan Day said after the game, they were expecting Oregon to try something like that if Oregon got the ball in on the 50 for a kickoff. But the players didn't react like they were expecting it. Caleb Downs tried to jump out of the way of the ball, and it hit him instead of trying to actually corral the ball and just fall on it like that. If you're saying after the game, oh yeah, we thought they were going to do something like that, and then your players looked like they had never even talked about the idea of that happening before, that's a poor reflection on the head coach, who, by the way, has a major hand in special teams this year.
And they maybe should call a timeout there and make sure everybody's on the same page. The fact that Caleb Downs is on the front line of kick coverage in a borrowed jersey is proof that it wasn't normal. They were expecting something. That's not, Caleb Downs doesn't play kickoff return in a borrowed jersey. He was only out there because they were ready for something. And
but Ryan also the front line was Caleb Downs and CJ. Put receivers out there. If you think they're going to do something, put a real hands team out there.
And in the name of mistakes, the only reason that Oregon did that is because Jordan Hancock got a 15-yard face mask penalty on the touchdown pass to Evan Stewart. Because I was trying to go back and rewatch it. He was just in coverage out of the slot. I think he just grabbed his receiver's face mask on the break. That's why they did it. So if Ohio State had not had a 15-yard face mask penalty, Oregon wouldn't have tried that because they were kicking off from the 50. That was why they risked it. And Dan Lanning was talking about they could have taken it on the 2-point play, and then they ran that weird swinging gate 2-point play that didn't work at all. And he was like, well, we could have taken it on the 2-point play and made it more like it. But they wanted to do this so badly that they were like, screw it. We won't take the yardage on the 2-point. We'll take it on the kickoff so we can do that. So initially when Ryan Day talked about it, I thought they had seen something in tape that they knew Oregon was going to try something in that game. Actually, he just means situationally. When Oregon's only kicking off from the 50-yard line, they're expecting Oregon to try something. But what Oregon had practiced was line drive it off a dude. Have you ever seen that before?
I have never seen that before. But how damning of a comment is that from Ryan Day? Oh yeah, it's a big game. We thought they were going to try some stuff. And it's did you ever consider trying some stuff?
But I don't think it was that. I thought he meant it like that. I think he meant it that once they kicked off from the 50, we just expected they got 15 extra yards. They're going to try something here. I don't think it was on Tuesday. They thought they're going to line drive it at us. But anyway, yes, exactly. And you called it after the game. You thought it was intentional because the Dan Lanning diabolical grin. Yeah. He was like, ha, 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 ha.
Right.
Man, Ohio State fans wish they saw that diabolical grin. What does Ryan Day have for him? I think it might even rise to the level of the number one critique for me beyond clock management of That's what you're there for. You have to get your team over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing to not make mistakes and give yourself a chance to win. It is another to get over the top. And they've been so close. And I'll wrap with this at the end of the show. People don't want to hear my list of big games and stuff right now. But I think it is. Someone needs to have a conversation. Jim Tressel needs to have a conversation with Ryan Day. Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel need to have a conversation with Ryan Day about you've got to have something more. You can't just rely on your guys as much as you believe in them.
Yeah, I mean they did some different stuff offensively, right? The stuff with the Emeka Egbuka in the backfield was new. There was a couple other formations that were new. Chip Kelly put David Adolph in the game and then used him in the lead block for Quinshon Judkins. So it's not that they came with all of what we've seen in the first 5 games and didn't switch anything up. They did, but I think even having said that, we're talking about something different, right? We're talking about trying to steal a possession or trying to manufacture a back-breaking explosive play, which Ohio State, aside from the Travion Henderson 53-yard run, really didn't have. It had some big pass plays, but it didn't have anything that rose to the level of the 69-yard reception to Troy Frank. Didn't
even try.
Evan Stewart. Yeah, like there was just nothing. Every time there's a game like this, the only thing coaches talk about are explosive plays.
And Dan Lanning talked about that after the game. Dan Lanning
number one in their mind.
Limiting Ohio State's explosive plays, and they felt like they did.
Yeah, and then Ohio State didn't, right? But also, I think Oregon was more intentional about trying to find them than Ohio State was.
Ohio State in big games in recent times has really, I think, fallen into like, they took it away.
Mm-hmm.
Like the deep shots. This is Dylan Gabriel on throws of 20 yards or more was 4 of 4 for 177 yards.
Yeah.
That is devastating. They didn't 11.8% of his passes were 20 yards or more, which is right on average for them. It had been 11% coming in. They just hit every single one. Will Howard by PFF was 3 of 4 on throws of 20 yards or more, but it was for 96 yards. And they were all like 20 and 30 yard, like posts in the middle of the, you know what I mean? It's not,
like
they weren't
throws,
actual deep shots.
No, they're good throws,
they weren't deep shots.
The top off the defense. Yeah.
Oregon had like a 69-yarder and a 43-yarder. Ohio State did not have a ball that was in the air for 40 yards.
Mm-mm.
So, and we told you, I mean, like we knew that they didn't take a ton. They hit every single one, which I'll transition now to the third thing on my bad plays list. And he's a veteran, so he can handle it. I think they lost the game because of Denzel Burke. So the 2 Denzel Burke mistakes are backbreaking, devastating, and I'm not calling a guy out, but you can't natty or bust it and play like that in a big game. Like he is the leader of natty or bust, and he busted. So I know people like really like that and stuff in the offseason. I did not like it. And you can't talk it and then not walk it in that game. And it was a poor performance by a high-level player. And I think there are things Ohio State did wrong. That's why they lost.
I think you could point to that. Yeah. Johnson in a text had said, maybe the best cover corner in college football last year was the fish, and I have no idea how to process that.
What does that mean?
Find the fish is like find the weak link in the defense and then keep picking on it.
Oh, yeah. So let's bring, I want to bring in, I have a graphic. I'll send it to our texters. It's not a graphic. It's a screenshot. Okay. The second deep ball, the one for the touchdown, the 43-yarder.
Mm-hmm.
So simulated pressure. Will you just explain quickly to the folks who are not professional football coaches what simulated pressure is?
Simulated pressure is still rushing for players, but you are replacing defensive linemen with second-level players. So defensive linemen will drop out. Linebackers and or safeties will replace them. But at the end of the day, you're still only rushing 4 people.
Popular right now to do that?
Yeah, because it gives the effect of a blitz without actually diverting extra resources to it.
Jim Knowles is doing it a decent amount now, right?
He's trying.
I think he's addicted to it. Go screenshot this. The second deep ball touchdown. Ohio State does simulated pressure. Mm-hmm. They bring 2 linebackers. This has to be a mistake. All 4 defensive linemen for Ohio State drop in coverage.
Yep.
So on that play, Oregon is protecting with 5 against a 2-man rush, the 2 linebackers. Dylan Gabriel has all day, and they gave you the all 22 on the game for this. Go watch this. There are 5, it's 3rd and 9. There are 5 Ohio State defensive players 7 yards from the line of scrimmage covering air. Jordan Hancock is covering a crosser. There are 5 Ohio State defenders and 1 Oregon guy. They're doing nothing on the play. They have no role in the play. So that's 7 Ohio State defenders, 2 linebackers rushing the passer, and 4 defensive linemen. The strength of the team. All these future NFL guys are floating in nothingness because you want to simulate pressure and trick Oregon. The result is Oregon, there's no pass rush, yet Ohio State is manned up in 4 one-on-one matchups on like 3 vertical routes and another deep route. There is no help anywhere. And the result is Denzel Burke gets smoked. But Ohio State got nothing. They got no pass rush, and they have no help. And they have 5 guys covering 1 guy in the middle of the field on 3rd and 9. It is an absolutely insane screen grab. And I would ask Jim Knowles about this the way I asked about what are you doing blitzing JJ McCarthy so 1 Cam Brown missed tackle in 2022 can lead to a touchdown. Bill, that can't be the plan. There must have been a miscommunication that all 4 defensive linemen dropped, right?
Possibly. I think, Jim Knowles, he tries to guess what the other team's going to run sometimes. And I think he probably thought they were going to get something short in the middle of the field there. So he just muddied the middle of the field, and then Oregon threw the ball over their head. It is not, I have never seen Jim Knowles run a play where he dropped all of the defensive linemen. He has dropped the ends. He was dropping the ends a ton in this game. He has dropped the tackles. He has never dropped them all at the same time. So perhaps there was a miscommunication there, like a 2-man rush on 3rd and 9. Just like, a 2-man rush on 3rd and 9 with no help over the top does not seem like
I've never seen it before.
2 things that should be happening in tandem together. Right. So I would have to assume there was some kind of bust there. Yeah.
It's 0 blitz coverage with no pass rush.
Yeah.
If you're mad at Jim Knowles, be mad about that play. It is an absolutely insane play.
Yeah.
They are out. Here we are again. It's like, where offensively, it's like, where's the extra thing you have? And it's like, here's the extra thing we have on defense. It's a 2-man pass rush and man coverage on 4 verticals. Oh, never seen that before. Okay.
It's a cover 0 blitz with no blitz. Yeah.
With no blitz. Go screenshot it. 5 guys.
I thought it in the moment. It was crazy. Yeah.
Go I have it. I'm going to send it to you. It blows your mind. And also, I get it. We can't pretend that having Tyleik Williams in coverage is the same as having Sonny Styles in coverage. So it's like, we're going to trick him. And it's like, okay, good luck with Tyleik Williams. That seems effective. Oh, on 3rd and 9 on a gotta have it play, we're going to take the disruptive defensive tackle and drop him. And
well, he did that.
Things. Once every 50 plays, the defensive tackle gets an interception because the quarterback doesn't see him. And then sometimes you wind up with a deep ball over your head because Tyleik Williams is taken out of the play by his defensive coordinator.
Yeah, they ran a play against Notre Dame last year where they dropped the tackles and Sam Hart almost threw the ball directly into Tyleik Williams' belly. So, like, it is an effective change-up to your simulated pressure package if you drop the tackles instead of dropping the ends. But I just can't think of a rational explanation for dropping them both. Dropping them all at the same time.
So I would like Jim Knowles to be asked about that play at the next availability.
He talked after the game, right?
He did talk. I didn't go through this whole thing. So we can talk about that. I did not hear Ryan Day asked about specifically the late game clock management.
He was not. I couldn't hear the questions all that clearly. He certainly didn't respond to anything as if he was asked by it.
So I understand sometimes like it's frenetic after a game and you're trying to cover the game and you're not even paying attention as much as you would like to at the end of the game because you're trying to get downstairs and everything. He's got to be asked about that post game. So like, there's a lot of people who flew to Oregon to like not ask about the clock management. I don't like that. I don't know why I wasn't asked about that. I would have asked about it. So we got to ask about that stuff. There was a lot of feelings questions. Like, you've got to get specific about how they didn't execute that game at the end. You can't have 15 feelings questions. It's not about, it's like, let's talk football. There are time for feelings questions. Like, this is like, the feelings are fine. Like, nothing has changed for their ultimate goals. It's like, let's figure out like where the mistakes remain. So like, you got to do better, man. Like, I was disappointed in the post game. And if somebody asked it specifically and like he just didn't answer it, we couldn't hear the questions, then I'll apologize. But like, I thought that was not a great post game. Because the Oregon people asked Dan Lanning about the stuff. So I thought that was horrible.
It was a really bad call. And like Jim Knowles' simulated pressures were like entirely ineffective the entire night.
Yes. So where are we on Jim Knowles? Were there not a lot of comments about him?
Yep. Jason, as a defense, you can't be out there giving up 4 yards shy of 500 yards, and I don't care about what Oregon has on its offense. 341 in the air, 155 on the ground, with a 5-yard per rush average, 0 sacks on 34 throws, and only 2 tackles for loss. That's just nasty work. No excuse for not being able to take something away and make the opposition work harder. And then he says, Jim Knowles versus top 5 teams while at Ohio State. 2022 Michigan 530 yards, 2022 Georgia 533 yards, 2023 Michigan 338 yards, 2024 Oregon 496 yards, 1,897 yards in 4 games and 149 points. He's not been good. He's not called good games in Ohio State's best games, I think is the point. Like, Ohio State's defense squashes bad offenses, and then I think has largely not shown up against the best teams.
So I actually think, I appreciate the texture comment. I actually think that's the wrong view on that, because this is how big games in college football are played now. Alabama, Georgia, both teams gained over 500 yards. Like, to say like, oh, we stop Marshall, but we don't stop the good teams. Like, this is how big time games are played, for real.
I do think, I think I agree that good offense more often than not does beat good defense, but I still think there's an opportunity for defenses to make splash plays that Ohio State's defense does not make in these games.
I agree, but like, you can don't statistic yourself on this.
Yeah,
like, I can't believe, and it's
fair.
one of those things. Again, it does not do anybody any service to say I don't care about Oregon's offense. That can't be true. That does not help Ohio State fans on Sunday. That's the best offense they're going to face. I swear to God. Like, Texas's offense is not that good when they're clicking like that. I don't know what to tell you. Like, if you can't tip the cap to some degree to the other team, it's not reality. It's just not a realistic way to view how this stuff works. To just look at stats and be like, I don't care about the other team. This is how the games are played. So let's analyze it and talk about where things can be better. But the whole point is you have to have an offense to keep up here. This is not 13-9 Alabama LSU national championship game territory anymore. That is not how college football is played. Yeah. They're not making splash plays, and they are, again, and here's the other thing too. I definitely saw comments from people like, this is why we were mad about giving up a drive to Marshall, whatever. What a lot of people wanted was more press man. Did you see what happened to the Ohio State corners when they were asked to cover guys one-on-one? So they did get burned on some stuff where they did 3-man pressure. They dropped 8. They played a soft zone behind it. And Dylan Gabriel multiple times hit the gap over the linebackers in front of the secondary. Multiple times. That's what good teams do. That's how that works. The Ohio State corners in man matchups got exposed a little bit. Jordan Hancock had a pass interference in the end zone. Davison Igbenogson got run by and had to grab a guy. It was offsetting penalties, so it doesn't count in the stat book, but he got beat on that. And Denzel Burke got beat twice. So, like, what do you want? You don't want soft coverage because then you feel like you're giving up easy completions, and you want more man coverage, and then they got burned. So, but it's also one of those, well, people want to fire Tim Walton? I don't know. Tim Walton's great. So they did make some plays. I thought the Ohio State corners would play better in this game, but also it's the best passing attack they're going to face the rest of the year. So, yeah. I think you can hold them accountable in the moment for specific plays, but how should they play that, do you think, Landis, from a coverage standpoint? Because they got burned both ways. They got burned in zone and in man.
I think it's what I said going into the game. You have to mix it up, and maybe there's something to not always pushing the right buttons, right? Like, you're playing you're playing super soft on 3rd and 6 and they convert an easy throw to get a first down, and then you're playing super tight press coverage on 2nd and 8 and they run by you for a touchdown kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Like there's like a finger on the pulse kind of conversation there that maybe Jim Knowles is like, I think clearly still working through, right? That was his thing when he first got here. It's like, I cannot, with the JJ McCarthy play, I cannot believe you blitzed him there kind of stuff, right? So
Yep.
I think there's still some of that. I don't think there's one like right answer, do this and you'll be fine kind of thing. I think it's still feeling out the game and knowing when to be aggressive and when not to be. And it does feel like Jim Knowles, by his nature, is a very aggressive defensive coordinator who feels, I still think, like very much a little in between on how he's supposed to call games with this team and its goals and its talent. And it's burned him a few times. Like he's trying to find ways to mimic the feeling of that pressure and that aggression without actually doing so. And then you get plays where there are 4 defensive linemen in coverage. Like I think Jim Knowles' defense is always going to give up big plays. It's just sort of the nature of how he chooses to go about things. I do think he is not necessarily able to do the things he would like to do to generate pressure. Which is like brings you back to a conversation about like always being in a 4-down front kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So there's still that too. We got a question like that from Derry.
Yep.
Derry said, "Am I the only one who thinks it's kind of crazy at this point that you have a defensive coordinator who has ravaged offenses with his Leo/Jack position, and you're telling me that we can't use it? I wholeheartedly believe pressure is everything when it comes to defense, and we don't have it. Where do we go from here?" I think Jim Knowles is very much caught in between on how to creatively generate pressure in a world where he has to keep 4 defensive linemen on the field.
Yeah. Do you think it is at a breaking point? And let's talk about it out in the open. Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson clearly do not see eye to eye on this stuff. It has been ongoing since the moment Jim Knowles got here. Larry Johnson has won. They do what Larry Johnson wants to do with that front. Are we at a breaking point?
Yeah, I kind of thought we were there because this is not the first time we've had this conversation, right? So I think we were past that point. It's just now we get to talk about it coming off of a top 5 game where I think it really mattered. So yes, but I don't. Well, why would anything change now, right? It ultimately comes back to Ryan Day, who I think does not empower his defensive coordinator to do what he wants to do, for whatever reason. So yes, we're there, but we've been there since Jim Knowles got here.
Right. And it has not changed. And again, this has been an ongoing thing. It's just very odd to look at the stuff sometimes. It's like they had a bunch of pressure statistically, at least by one site, and it did not feel like Dylan Gabriel was bothered at all by anything. Dylan Gabriel was unbothered. And I think Will Howard was mostly unbothered when his 2 most inexperienced offensive linemen weren't getting smoked in one-on-ones.
Yeah, that's his pressure rate, I think, was significantly lower than Dylan Gabriel's, at least on PFF. Will's was like 26 or 28 or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
26.3% of his dropbacks, he was under pressure. That's pretty good. And also he was good against pressure in this game, which he had really not been prior to this game.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's weird, like those percentages don't make sense to me because I definitely felt that Will Howard was made more uncomfortable than Dylan Gabriel was.
Yes.
But I still think Will Howard largely handled it pretty well, aside from maybe the sack on the last drive where he fell down.
Yeah. So I think in conclusion, do we want to run through some truths about this game? So I'm definitely more negative about Ohio State than I was talking on Saturday night on KOTN. We're diving in deep for the Ohio State audience here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Ohio State came out and like blew this game. I don't. They made a lot of winning plays and they had an absolute opportunity at the end and they were right there. And we just understand why it works this way. But if there are 2 seconds go differently, everything else about the game is exactly the same and the conversation is completely different. Yep. And we are in a great win on the road by Ohio State, and they still would have made the same mistakes. And instead, we are at devastating loss for Ohio State. The coach can't win big games, and everything is still the same if Will Howard gets down 2 seconds earlier. Now, the things they did contributed to that. It's not luck. We just went through how they lost seconds that were there on the late game drive, and that Dan Lanning and sinister Dan Lanning with the onside line drive kick and with the 12 men on the field, there's two specific things right there of like a coach trying to get you over the top. So it's not like all this stuff is related, but for everything that still happened, it was still that close. The idea, can you imagine if Ohio State had gone out there and just been like not ready to play and lost by 40, right? That's like a fire alarm. What's going on here? And I will give a little credit. I just looked at like Brett McMurphy, for instance, because Brett McMurphy, his ballot after Alabama, Georgia was like, these are my top two teams on my ballot. Can't wait to see this played 9 more times. Every single playoff game should be Alabama versus Georgia. And he put out his ballot this morning and he has Texas 1, Oregon 2, and Ohio State 3. So, and I saw another ballot, like Ohio State is not, the polls aren't out as we're recording, but they are not plunging down the polls. People are not looking at this and thinking that Ohio State is bad. So I don't think Ohio State fans should look at this and think Ohio State is bad. They're not. They made a lot of good plays. They have a lot of good players. They didn't get over the top on the road. I think if that game's in Ohio Stadium, they probably win. But we certainly can find, we just went through it. Specific moments. Ryan Day does something different here. Denzel Burke does something different here. Jim Knowles does something different here. Will Howard does something different here. They win. So all the opportunities are there. So give me 3 of your truths about this game that you're going to take away from this.
I mean, I think I agree with a lot of what you just put out there. I would say, I still very much think Ohio State can win a national title. Like I don't know that anything that happened in that game makes me downgrade Ohio State from a talent perspective relative to their ability to win a national title. But that is because I also think that Oregon is good, and I'm not trying to like make anybody feel better about a loss by saying the team you lost to was good. I'm just saying like that's how I feel coming out of this game. Like 2 very good teams played a close game. One of them had the win. The team that played at home won. I do question a little bit Ryan Day's ability to push all the right buttons to win a game like this. I think I was for sure. I think I was moved more in that direction after this game. And I'm not. I guess I won't entirely write off his ability to figure that out, but I also don't begrudge anybody who has, because we have mounting evidence that he doesn't always handle this well, right? And I also think that maybe Will Howard is good enough to get them where they want to go after watching this game. Like I know that the last play was weird, and he certainly has a hand in some of the time management stuff at the end of the game. But I thought he played his best game of the year against Oregon, which is not nothing. Like on the road in that kind of game, I thought he played his best game. So I would take that moving forward too. Like I didn't sense a whole lot of people via the text who said they were out on Will Howard after that game. I probably saw more of the opposite, people who were a little encouraged by what they saw. I was encouraged by what I saw. I think if I had questions ultimately about this guy's ability to play on these stages, I think I feel a little better about that, even given the way that the game ended.
On 1, 2. Okay. I'm trying to add up some stuff here on the fly real quick. So the offensive line, they have 2 spots that they have issues at right now. And I don't know that there are easy fixes there. That's like a hard truth that I think can't be denied. And they have some work to do. And they have bad luck with the Josh Simmons injury, but they also did this to themselves, that they are thin. Yeah. They found like 4.5 guys on the offensive line. And like the half spot got hurt and didn't play great in this game. And then one of the full spots, the best spot, got hurt and is probably out for the year. That is potentially very problematic. Ryan Day needs to find a way to steal plays, make a difference for his team in big games. And the pressure issue for the defense is ongoing, and they still need to figure this out of when are we going to be risky? When are we not going to be risky? What's going to get us over the top here? Because it's kind of crazy that it's like this far into it, right? And that Jim Knowles, I think there is reasonable. He's not a terrible defensive coordinator; they shouldn't fire him. But like there is stuff here, Landis, that that we are having conversations this far into it of Jim Knowles like still trying to figure it out is a little odd, is it not?
It's very odd, yeah, and especially it's odd too that it doesn't feel like Jim Knowles has been able to like layer a whole lot into this defense given its experience at some key spots, right? You think with everything they have coming back and so much familiarity in the scheme that there would be ways to get a little more creative with what they're doing, and that really hasn't happened. At least from my vantage point. Maybe people who understand X's and O's a little more than I do might say differently, but yeah, it is odd. It's frustrating, I think, more than anything else. That it just feels like maybe Jim Knowles and the defense are like kind of playing with their like one arm partly tied behind their back some of the time because of some schematic stuff that they're not overcoming.
So I will say there's going to be some hot stuff. So this is the last. Is there anything else you want to say specifically about the game? Because I want to talk about Ryan Day like historically in big games before we wrap up. Is there anything else from the texters? Anything?
There's a couple like I think there's things that kind of stand as sort of prevailing thoughts from the game. I'll just read a couple. I'll read two of them. Zach, because I think these are like two kind of opposing points of view. Zach says, this loss crushed my confidence and truly crafted the identity of the team that I root for. Big game equals a lot of penalties, embarrassing play from veteran defenders and offensive coaches that make terrible decisions. So that's one point of view. Here is another from Jim. My rational brain is saying, you're a 34-year-old man with 3 kids and a mortgage. Why can't you sleep because some teenagers moved the ball 15 yards shorter than you would have liked? Have some perspective. Then he says, well, rational brain, you can cram it. But seriously, and he says, but seriously, the season isn't over. This team is good enough to beat Michigan and probably Penn State, maybe even win a playoff game. It's just not the monster that I thought it was going to be. They win those 2 games and we'll have a shot at Oregon again. They lose those 2 games and we're probably talking about having a new head coach, but there is still a tomorrow, was his point of view.
Yeah, I was talking to my UPS guy on Friday, and I was saying, like, if Ohio State goes out there and like takes care of business, today would have been a super team discussion.
Yes.
If they would have won by 17, it's like, okay, is this one of the 5 best teams in the modern college football era? So like, we're not having that discussion. In terms of the penalties, these were the penalties, just so people know. 4 false starts, Josh Simmons and G. Scott early. I feel like sometimes G. Scott is imprecise in games when it matters. I can't get the Michigan fighting penalty out of my head.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not fair, and that was a while ago.
He made some big catches. Yeah, he took the linebacker a time or two, but yeah, I think there's
schemed him open pretty well.
There's details.
So false starts. Josh Simmons, G. Scott early, Zen Mahalski, and Tegra Shabola late. We're talking about those 2 spots on the offensive line. They had a delay a game on a punt. So like those are 5 crowd penalties, I would say. And so like, do you want to go through and say like, we can't have those? It's like, okay, the first 2 are veteran guys, and including the tackle that like, you feel like you can't live without. So sometimes guys get penalties. What are you going to do? And then the other 2 late in the game, and it did kill them. It like immediately set them back on some stuff, right? So our young offensive lineman, I don't know what you're going to do. So those are 5 penalties. They have the Davis and Igbinosin grab on the tight end running past him. That was actually an offset penalty and didn't count. They have the Jeremiah Smith push off. They have the Jordan Hancock handsy grabbing in the end zone. And then you have the Hancock face mask that set up the kick. So 2 bad Jordan Hancock penalties. So Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke like did not play at the level that they need to play at in this game. So in terms of penalties, like making mistakes, that Oregon had an illegal shift. They had the player, Trayshawn Holden, spit on a player on Davis and Igbinosin, get kicked out and get a 15-yard penalty for that. That was like the craziest thing. They had a lineman downfield that Ohio State declined, and then they had the offsetting penalty with the Igbinosin. So more penalties for Ohio State. The visiting team having more penalties is not a shock to me. I went through, I could not find another Ohio State, and this is not like a I'm right conversation. This is right. This is what we owe you as people who get paid to cover this team. I found at least 27 predictions for this game for people who cover Ohio State on a regular basis, and every single one picked Ohio State. I think it contributes to the feeling of the fan base that the people who cover this team think Ohio State's never going to lose big games. And it sets people up to believe that Ohio State losing a big game is like unacceptable. Because in a game that's a 3-point spread, that's 2 versus 3, Ohio State's on the road, there's not another person who covers this team that thought Oregon might win. I think it has an effect, Landis. And I think maybe every fan base does this, but I think a lot of Oregon writers picked Ohio State as well. I don't think it helps. And I think part of Ohio State fans being very upset after a very close game where Ohio State acquitted itself well in a lot of ways, and we just went through every way they didn't. I think sometimes the coverage sets you guys up to be mad because nobody ever thinks Ohio State's going to lose. I don't think it's helpful. I understand why the media does it. I don't think it helps fans to not be realistic. Not a single person thought they might lose.
I don't disagree with you. I think you're right. As someone who picked Ohio State to win, I think you're right.
But like you and I had an hour-long discussion about the ins and outs of the game, and we came down. You and I picked the exact same game. We picked this game exactly as it went, which was the ball in a team's hands at the end of the game. Ohio State scored 31. We both picked Ohio State to score 31, and it was a matter of like, are they going to get over the top or just fall short? So you and I saw this game the exact same way, and we had an in-depth conversation in which we told people that Oregon was good and absolutely had a chance to win here. I don't think it helps you guys. I'm just telling you that. And if somebody wants to disagree with me, private beer publicly, that's fine. Here's the last thing. I did see, and this is stuff that on days like this, I'm sometimes think like, so the football stuff is over. This is just feelings talk now. Like, I'm not the guy that people want to hear from sometimes on days like this. If you want to be mad and fire everybody, I want to help you enjoy your team as much as possible. Ohio State is an incredibly high level, high achieving team. So Ryan Day is 2-7 against top 5 teams. That's a fact, right? Mm-hmm. That's just a fact. The losses, 4 of them are in the playoff. So you earn the right to lose those games by being good. And then 2 of those are Michigan games. 3 of them are Michigan games.
3 of them are Michigan games.
3 of them are Michigan games. So, no, 3 are in the playoff. 3 are Michigan games.
And 1's a national championship. Or sorry, two are playoff semifinals. 1's a national championship. 2. 3 are Michigan games, and then this game.
Yeah, for top 5 games, right? Mm-hmm. So this is the point. So he's 8-8 against top 10 teams, and like it's one of the things I get frustrated by this sometimes. Like I saw a national college football say, like, it feels like Ohio State hasn't won a game like this in a long time. It's like, you mean like the game last year at Notre Dame when Ohio State marched down the field and won the game on the road against a top 10 team, or Notre Dame was number 9 coming into that game. Right. That game doesn't count. Like, I can't remember the last time Ohio State won a game like this. How about last year? Does that not count? Because here's the deal. Marcus Freeman and James Franklin get heat for not beating Ohio State. But I think a lot of people don't count those games as wins for Ohio State. They don't count them as big wins.
Yeah, they don't.
Ryan Day is 8-8 in top 10 games. He's 8-8. Okay. So that's one of them. It's like, if you're like, whatever, more often than not, when you root for a really good team, your definition of big games cuts off right at the point where you can count the losses and not count the wins. So top 5 versus top 10, that's a fact. But also, there's a part of this that's like, are Michigan a bunch of dirty cheaters who stole those games from Ohio State? Or is Ryan Day and Ohio State in this era a team that can't win big games? Is it both? Do you simultaneously think Michigan cheated, but you also want to fire Ryan Day for not winning them? I don't know what that is. I can't. And so like, I'm just on a day like this, I'm trying to like contextualize for people, Landis. And this is why, like, you can stop listening and watching. Some people do not want this, and I absolutely get it. Right? Is that fair? There are people who don't want to hear me say this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say it, and I'm not defending somebody, because if I was in the news conference, I would press him as hard as anybody. And you guys know that. I'm not an apologist. I'm a contextualizer. Here are the people that Ryan Day has lost to. And it is about the constantly moving goalposts of Ohio State having to beat whoever the best team is. And that team always changes, but Ohio State is always there. One of the big losses is to Clemson. That program has become an example of what not to do in the modern era. So yes, Clemson beat Ohio State in that first playoff semifinal in a game that Ohio State was right there. But would you rather have Dabo? Or would you rather have Ryan Day? Would you rather be Ohio State or Clemson right now? Right, Landis? Is that not is this not a fair way to think about this at least a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Especially that game because they got it back the next year too.
Okay. So Clemson, one of the losses is to Clemson when they can't win the big game. One of the losses is to the greatest college football coach of all time against Alabama, maybe Nick Saban's best team in a year where in COVID, Ohio State found a way to reach the national championship game and lose to Nick Saban. That's just a check mark in a column. And Bama is on fire because Nick Saban left. Would you rather be Ohio State or Bama right now, Landis?
Ohio State.
Okay. So I'm just saying. 3 of them are to Michigan. I almost think the Michigan discussion is a separate conversation. It is hard when it's like simultaneously Ohio State can't beat Michigan and also can't beat top 5 teams, and they get penalized twice for the same loss in some ways. I think the Michigan thing is like a separate thing almost. It's like you must acknowledge that Ohio State was good. Ohio State must play its best game against Michigan, and like that's a deal. But also Jim Harbaugh was 0-5 against Ohio State and was allowed to stick around and get that right. So that like Ohio State and Ryan Day can't beat Jim Harbaugh. Michigan's on fire right now, and they were on fire before those 3 wins. So I get it. It's not an excuse, but also, would you rather be Ohio State or Michigan right now?
Ohio State.
Okay. One is to Georgia. Kirby Smart pushed the Mississippi State quarterback on Saturday. Did you see that?
I did see that. Yeah, I sent it to you. Yeah.
Kirby Smart's players are a danger to the community. Kirby Smart almost lost to Kentucky as a 34-point favorite, beat Mississippi State by 10, and played such a crappy first half against Bama that their miraculous comeback wasn't enough. Would you rather have Ryan Day or Kirby Smart right now? Because that's one of the losses for Ohio State. Who would you rather have? Who would you rather be?
That's a complicated question.
It is a complicated question. Okay, so those are the 6 losses before last night. Dabo, Saban, 3 to Harbaugh, and Kirby Smart. That's all I'm saying. And now it's Dan Lanning. So now Dan Lanning's the next one up. Dan Lanning was 0-2 against Washington. Dan Lanning had never won a game like this before. And now he got one at home by a point. So do you want to change head coaches based on that? That's my point here. That Ohio State is, and by the way, the guy that Ryan Day used to be compared to is 5-8 as a head coach in his last 13 games at USC in Lincoln Riley. And that used to be the standard. So all I'm saying is the bar is really high. And meanwhile, the top 10 wins against Penn State and Notre Dame in some people's minds don't count. So I don't exactly know what to do with that, but that's the reality. So he is 2-7 against the top 5. He is 8-8 against the top 10. And we just went through what all of them are. The other loss is the Oregon home loss when their defense was on fire and CJ Stroud was making a second career start when Oregon was 12. So I don't know, Landis, like, does that help people or not help people? It's more about like when the media is like, I can't remember the last time Ohio State won a big game. And it's like, for real? You can't remember? In 2023, they beat number 9 Notre Dame and number 7 Penn State. But like, you can't remember the last time Ohio State won a big game. What is your definition? So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that helps people. I think there are a decent amount of people who responded to us, who I think, are cognizant of what you just laid out and agree with it and contextualize Ohio State that way. And then for those who don't, I don't know that it helps because I think saying Ohio State hasn't won a big game is wrong.
Yeah.
I also think it is somewhat fair to separate a top 5 game from a top 10 game. Because even in like some of those top 10, maybe it's more of a talent equated game kind of conversation. And in those games, Ohio State has come up short. I think that's a fact as well.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't call the Notre Dame games talent equated necessarily. And I don't think every Penn State game has been a talent equated game. So I think some of them have, some of them haven't. All the 7 losses we're talking about, I think they have been. and they lost 7 of them.
Yes. So I think both things can be true, right? Like Ohio State can't win big games. I think it's where you draw the line. Does Ryan Day, as we already covered, does Ryan Day need to help them get over the top in these games? Yes. But again, like a lot of that, the thing about Tress is that Tress beat Michigan, but Michigan wasn't good other than in 06. I mean, my God, Michigan was awesome in 06. That's one of the great wins in Ohio State history. So, like in 06 and 07, this is where Ohio State fans were, where as a young writer then I can remember thinking like, I can't believe Ohio State's the second best team in the country and the fans are this mad and sad and miserable in a lot of ways. And I think we are, like, people want to throw in the Cooper stuff. That was like losing to lesser Michigan teams and finding like that's 2-10-1. I actually think this is more reminiscent of 06, 07, 08 Tressel losing to Florida, LSU, and Texas in the postseason, and losing to USC in the regular season in 08 and 09, and feeling like in equal talent games in the regular, like in equal talent games, not against Michigan, because Michigan wasn't equal talent back then, other than 06.
Yeah.
They can't get over the top. And what's happening to not get over the top? And now, like, Jim Tressel right now is a beloved figure in Ohio State history. He also won a national championship and saved Ohio State football in year 2. So, like, Ryan Day didn't do that. So just like with Chris Holtmann, if you do something early, you gain a lot of capital. So then if you aren't doing things later, Ryan Day hasn't gained that capital. So I understand that, but that's what this reminds me of. So, but I don't think, I think it is not systemic as much as like tweaks. So I do think Ryan Day, I think like the late game management and like in the big moments think is real, but I think like you just have to find like 2 plays and like run them in the big games. Like I don't think they're out talented. I don't think they're hopeless. Like, again, it's not 41-14 in some of this stuff. And the things that are burning them, they've tried to fix. Is like, okay, they blitz too much. Okay, we're not going to blitz as much. It's like, okay, now they're not getting enough pressure. Now they're so. But if you're just, if I understand fans like being upset and angry and wanting to vent, but we just want to lay out the facts as we see them, so everybody can have the right context to be angry, justifiably angry on a day like this.
Yeah, I actually think the fact that they're not 40-14 makes it worse in some respects.
41-14. It's a
41-14.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So like 32-31, where you can pinpoint 13 bad plays from Ohio State is a little tough to swallow, right? Because if it's 12 bad plays, you win.
No, I know, because I just never think that way, because to me the idea of you get your doors blown off is better than competing the entire game down until literally the last half second.
I mean, it's one of those things you say is better until it actually happens, right? Like that's part of it too. But
I mean, it hurts you more the day after, right? Because you've given up, right? Ted Ginn Jr. goes out. They can't block the ends. Like, people have given up by halftime. Like, Ohio State goes for it on 4th down, whatever, in the 3rd quarter. It's like, okay, this is over. In the 2006 national title game, this goes down to the wire. But when you look back and say, how would I rather have my team compete? I think I just would think you'd rather have your team compete. So again, I'm not trying to tell people how they should feel. I'm trying to lay out like the situation. But if I was sitting in there the next time Ryan Day talked, I'd ask 4 pinpoint hard questions about like why this didn't happen, because there's enough there to do that. So anyway, I think I moved like 15% more towards like Ohio State did not do what it needed to do. I still think across the board they played a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think it was like a B game, and Oregon played an A game.
I agree. I think that's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
So, and this goes back to like, you know, like I didn't think Natty or Bust helped. So I know people like confidence. Denzel's in a weird spot right now. So I'll be very curious how he reacts. I would imagine, who knows how he's going to react. And he's still a young man and he didn't do it on purpose, but that was not the performance you needed by like the number one guy leading the charge of we're here to like destroy everybody. Right. So that was a tough one. So, okay. Those are all my notes. Is there anything else? We're good.
I think we covered it. Yeah. I think you should go take a nap.
Yeah, I think I will go take a nap. We will. Do you want to do? Maybe we're setting up. This is one of those things you try to plan stuff, especially for a bye week. Of like, hey, we had like maybe a nice little thing planned that I don't think anybody wants to do with us, or you guys don't want to hear at this moment. I think we can do another round of questions on Wednesday and maybe do a survey.
Yeah.
And maybe ask some people some more things and run through this a little bit more on Wednesday's Kings of Columbus. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, that feels right. And maybe we can maybe reassess the path ahead based off what we learned, on Saturday too.
Yeah, I think look ahead.
Yeah.
Because the other thing about this, and this is like, it's one of these things now, people make playoff projections now. This actually means nothing. Like, it means nothing. If Ohio State and Oregon win out, they're going to meet in the Big Ten title game, which was true no matter who won. And then the winner of that title game gets the bye. Yeah. And the loser will host a playoff game. So that is as true today as it was before the game started on Saturday. So, like, if you hate the 12-team playoff like that, you don't want to hear that, but that's just the reality. And I have not been buying into the 5 seed is better than the 1 seed, but there are a lot of people who do. Mm-hmm. So if you want to start playing the path and this, and but also if they get Oregon again, it's going to be an Indy. So nothing's changed, honestly.
Yeah.
If the actual, so the thing from the results standpoint, almost literally nothing has changed other than them flipping spots. Ohio State was 2, Oregon was 3. It might be that now Oregon is 2 and Ohio State's 3. What as we've been saying, it's not about the results, it's about the performance. Are there parts of the performance that would lead you to have much less confidence in Ohio State's ability to win a national title? I absolutely understand having some less I don't have my confidence level for Ohio State hasn't been cut in half.
No, neither has mine. I think maybe I think it'll be good to get people's thoughts on that one. Just like, what do you think about them winning a national championship? But also, there weren't a lot of people saying like, oh, Ohio State's going to run the table. Like, so I think people were expecting a loss along the way. And I think when they did, it was this game that obviously seemed the most tricky. So now that it's happened, I would like to hear from people on what they think of Ohio State's ability to avoid a second loss before the postseason, right? Like, is there anything that happened on Saturday that makes you think Ohio State is more susceptible to 2 losses in the regular season than you thought coming into the season?
Right.
I would love to hear where people are on that.
Right. Okay. All right. I hope that helped in some way. I mean, honestly, that's like, it should, if we're not helping you, then like, what are we doing here? We should be entertaining you or helping you understand things because you have other things to do in your life and want some context from us or whatever, maybe. But if you're mad at us, I apologize, because like, that's not the intent. We're trying to help Ohio State fans enjoy their team. Okay. Tough loss for sure. Mm-hmm. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yursalski. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Sunday Sound Off on Kings of Columbus.